going on with HPIL. We're hearing from everybody how much they're loving it, and thanks for putting it together, by the way.
Well, you're welcome. It's been a labor of love. I've actually been working on this since 1988 with some of the original components. And they came out of some ancient Chinese natural medicines that they had developed that were for increasing longevity and lifespan. And so I started on that prior to my previous company even I had, and then I got into it and developed it as far as the Chinese technology would allow us to go, and science wasn't sophisticated enough at that time to be able to really isolate what the ingredients were, let alone knowing how they worked within the stem cells themselves. But over a period of time, incrementally, step by step, it went on and more things were added, and I was keeping a constant file working, and I had a product from my previous company, which is one of their best sellers they had, and it extended lifespan quite a bit. We did a lot of strength, stamina, and that, but we knew not why. It was, first I was very skeptical and dubious about it because it was an ancient Chinese formula for living longer. I thought, oh my God, how many times do you hear that kind of stuff? But I read some scientific studies the Chinese government was doing on it, and they had excavated it in the Ming Dynasty Emperor's tomb. And it went back and was even talked about in what they called the Yellow Emperor's book, which was 5,000 years ago, 5,800 years, I believe. But anyway, long time for them to be researching and following up, and it was such a valued formulation within the Chinese hierarchy that in the Ming Dynasty Emperor's tomb, it was buried with him in his sarcophagus itself, not just in the tomb, but in his sarcophagus. And so out of that, I thought if there's one culture that would really have a knowledge of these types of things, it would be the Chinese, because most cultures, when they're defeated, everything is pretty well trashed and changed and ruined and destroyed. And so the legacy from histories and eras gone by are just lost. It's like with the Romans, there's not so much left. All of the Greeks with Alexander the Great and the Persians and all those big empires that were destroyed by some other countries, they destroyed most of their literature and knowledge, but that didn't happen to the Chinese. So it gave me there was a reasonable amount of truth and to it and logic and reason, and that's what we're talking about. As D.W. was saying today, was wisdom. The wisdom was there, but we didn't quite know how it worked. Of course, you don't have to know how your car works in order to drive it and turn on the air conditioning and the radio and things like that. But we want to know more. But they really came across a major discovery when they were doing research on the ingredient that's in our Eternity, resveratrol, at Harvard Medical School. So they started studying that and said, it's working, but it's incomplete because while it is working and it's extending life and all of that, as I looked into it now, I thought that's the ingredient we have, of course, and we have it in our Eternity. I put it in from that, but they said it's not going the whole distance that the genetic profile has for it to do. So they started putting massive amounts of money in this, and they sold some of the technology they had developed to the pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline for $730 million for just the information so they could make a synthetic drug out of it. And it saves them that much in time, and new drugs are a couple of $1 billion now, so that's a viable expense and to save all that time. But in doing so, science progressively went on to where they now could understand the internal workings of the stem cell, bit by bit, but they knew some things, but now they really had a good picture of it. And they found that, what is the difference between an old stem cell and a young stem cell? Well, it's three basic things. They both do the same purpose. They produce new cells, or they might produce a protein or some other thing like that, but they're designed to produce new cells, an old one or a young one. So what's the physiological differences between the two? There's about 4 factors that are involved. The first one is all the metabolic processes that take place in it leave some waste that doesn't get out of the cell. The cell trying to get rid of most of it, but some of it builds up. It's called cellular sludge, lipofuscin, and it starts accumulating. Just like if you emptied 99% of your garbage in your house, what would it be like in 20 or 30 years? Your house would be full. And that's what happens within the cells. Some of this materials, the byproducts of making new cells or whatever it's doing, is left over and doesn't get excreted by the enzyme system. So that's one. Second is you have to have an energy source. That's accomplished by mitochondria. They're like the engine in your car. Just like a car takes in gasoline for the fuel source, the stem cells take in glucose. It's a high energy molecule for the fuel source. Then they both use oxygen. They both have a spark that ignites it. It oxidizes the gasoline, explodes, and gives the energy to the car. But on a cellular level, it does the same thing. It oxidizes the glucose, releases the energy in this type of sugar, and don't confuse that with sucrose. This is glucose. But anyway, it oxidizes that, releases the level, but it can't be a big bang like in a car, so you have hundreds of mitochondria circulating around in the cytoplasm of the cell. Now, you might think of a stem cell like an egg. It has a yolk. That would be the nucleus where all of the DNA is. The cytoplasm is like the white of the egg. And within the white, or the cytoplasm, is where all of the mitochondria are. And so you can't have one big one doing it. You got hundreds of them in the cells doing that. So when that happens, then the glucose gets oxidized. And oxidized glucose is sticky, and so you start building plaque up. It coats proteins and things, and even the coating to the nucleus that's for the DNA to do a lot of its work. And so everything starts plaquing up, just like plaque on your teeth, and you can't get rid of it all, and it just starts accumulating, and then sort of like a saran wrap film in certain places, a lot of the biological processes can't get through it or have to go around it, and the more plaque, the more inefficient it becomes. So that's the second thing that happens. The third thing that happens is you start wearing out parts of the stem cells. And it's just from like if you have 500,000 miles on your car engine, you'd have nothing running. It'd be worn out. But if you could overhaul it every time it got to a certain point and keep it at peak efficiency, suppose it had a major overhaul going on all the time, and anytime anything was going to break down, it was automatically repaired, you'd have a motor run virtually forever. And so mitochondria have their own DNA. They have 12 chromosomes, where they have 23 pairs in the nucleus. But the 12 are for doing other things, producing energy. But the mitochondria have the ability to produce more of themselves. They also have the ability to repair the damage that's done within them. So now that means high levels of energy because you can overhaul a mitochondria. So that's the next factor that takes place. The other thing is the stem cells themselves. Their systems, through a lot of oxidation that builds up, really much of it is hydrogen peroxide that develops because your levels of antioxidants go down, particularly glutathione is the most important one, but they go down and they let hydrogen peroxide, and what does it do to your hair? It bleaches it out. Well, what does it do to the stem cell? It oxidizes it and damages it. That's why your hair goes white or gray, is as you get older, your antioxidant levels go down so much that the hydrogen peroxide can't be neutralized, so it just starts bleaching out the natural melanin or pigment of your hair. So it's happening that way within the stem cell too. So you have that oxidation, that degradation going on within the stem cell, but also now they have found, which they once thought was impossible, to make new brain cells, they first thought was impossible, and then to make new stem cells impossible, and now they find out it has been happening since the beginning of mankind and in all types of mammals and animals, and they have the ability to create new stem cells, to regenerate, to repair themselves. And so what happens with an old stem cell? not producing much energy, leaking electrons, doing damage, toxic heavy metals accumulate in the sludge. Everything is all plaqued up. So as the scientists found out that here was a molecule that they could give at Harvard Medical School, and there are 6 Nobel Prize winners, Nobel laureates that have worked on this, not just in the same lab, but in different ones to bring it to pass. And they found out one ingredient that they could put into the cell would increase energy within the cell. And it would make it increase so much that in cells even in aged animals, their stamina, energy, regeneration, everything increased so much that they become much younger as they went on. But there were limitations. The limitations is cellular sludge with all the toxins that are in it, glycation, the cellular or the plaque on all the surfaces, the destruction of the mitochondria so they don't produce so well. Many of them die off. And the stem cells, which many of them become dormant. Some of them die off. And the ones that are working aren't working very efficiently. So you can increase the energy level to it, but unless you address all these other things, you don't get the maximum out of it. So I took a look at that, and they had an ingredient. A lot of patents have been put on this ingredient. In fact, Procter & Gamble put $200 million into it. So they're going to try and dominate it through patents because it's a natural ingredient. But so they can't patent the ingredient, they can only patent the use. So if we say it does this ingredient's in our product and it does this, that would violate their drug claim. But if we say this ingredient's in it and it supports this, that's a whole different thing because that's ambiguous. And you can look up the science for yourself and see what it does and make the conclusion. But what they don't tell you along the road is there's lots of scientists working on this now. NASA's got pretty excited about it because it can repair damage so fast. They now believe that they can send a person to Mars and back. And that might not sound, it's a lot of technology. Yeah, it takes a lot of technology to get them, but we have the technology to do that and have had it for a decade or two. The problem is everybody goes out eager and nobody comes back alive because the solar radiation is so intense that damages them. And if you have a 3 to 5 year mission in Mars, it'll kill everybody that goes out there because you're just like Swiss cheese. These particles from solar radiation that go through, they go right through the ship, through the space chute, through the body, and back out the other side and into space again. They're unstoppable. And so you're just being riddled, just like a machine gun going through with all these minuscule holes that they can't repair. But this ingredient can regenerate so much energy for so much repair. It's just like when you're young and you cut yourself and the wound heals, or scratch yourself and the wound heals so quick. And when you're older, it heals so slow. And what's the difference? Well, when you're older, when you're starting to get up close to 60, you're only operating about 20 to about 23%, maybe as much as 28% of what you were when you're 20. So you can see that you're a fourth or a fifth of where you were when you're 20 years old. So this speeds up all that. I'm giving you a lot of science. I'm trying to keep it general, but I'll give you the scientific generation so you can understand it. So you can speed up all of this energy. What they don't tell you, and I mentioned it just a minute ago, is scientists are working on this concept, and they found other ingredients, some that have been around for a bit. They didn't understand what the correlation was. Now they know what the correlation is within the stem cell, but the key to it, no one's been able to it's like a jigsaw puzzle. People have got important pieces here and there, but nobody's got the whole picture. We've got the whole picture, I believe, and the only product's doing it. So I have a system that comes in, it removes the plaque, supports. We have to say support because the cell is removing the plaque anyway, just not doing it well. But if you have those types of super nutrients that can give you enormous support for doing that, then you become much more efficient in removing the glycation. That's the oxidized glucose that's filming the protein surfaces of the cell. Second thing is there's ways to make the cellular sludge, the lipofuscin, that is building up. just like your car engine. If you never changed the oil and just added oil to it as it's needed, pretty soon it'd be so sludgy your car would stop, it'd be damaged, destroyed. There's now ways to make that sludge so that it is more permeable. There's also and the body is doing that, but there's a way to greatly increase that with types of nutrients. There's also nutrients that the cells dilate to a certain point to get rid of that sludge. There's a way to improve that. Now, you can see how scientific this is with everything we're doing. I'm not talking with notes. I'm just rambling here so you understand it, and you understand that I know it. So now we can improve the porosity of the cell membrane. We can make the sludge so that it is more metabolized and broke down, and you can create more enzymes in it. They're already being created, but now it's like you can force feed it with super nutrients, and now you can drain the sludge, the lipofuscin from the cell, we believe. This is all in theory because our product has not been tested with the FDA. The individual ingredients have, and according to DSHEA, which is the law that allows us to show you scientific studies, we can say supports. But if you want to know what it individually does, you have to look up the studies. They have to be, you can't use them in your advertising, but you can have them there. They just have to be on a separate page, or you can have a separate document, and you can look it up. And DSHEA means Dietary Supplemental Health Education Act. And it's what was put out there to combat Big Pharma in 1994, where they're trying to classify all vitamins and nutritional supplements, herbs, and everything as drugs, so they'd be regulated by the FDA, and only pharmaceutical companies could make them and sell them under prescription or OTC. They're trying to eliminate all the competition, but there's such an outcry. DSHEA, thank goodness, got written into law, so now we're following that. So now we've done that. We've cleaned up the cells. So now we look, and science has found, and this is the big thing that scientists don't want people to know because they've invested so much in this one ingredient, and they have an ingredient that they say, well, the patents are that it'll produce more NAD. That's an abbreviation. I won't tell you what they stand for, and they say this ingredient produces more NAD. Well, it definitely does. And it's got that, but there are others that are vastly superior to it. There are others that support it, and the system is already doing this. So let me emphasize that. There are systems that make it recyclable. There are systems that that empower it, that greatly enhance it. And so then if you have the stem cells repairing themselves, and they become all crinkly instead of round and oval, and they become all yellowish brown because of the internal contaminant of glycation and lipofuscin that's in them. If you can clear all that out, the cells become clear and clean. The size and shape of the nucleus and the cell itself, which has become all crinkly, it comes back smooth and round. It's indistinguishable. These are on tests on the one ingredient, which we cannot say our product does it. Let me emphasize that again because it hasn't been tested. But you can say that it supports this. And what it does is they found in all animal studies, and now they're doing human studies showing it to be the same. And that's just mammals. I mean, it does it in a bird or a snake or a fish or anything. It works the same. It's a universal principle. But now they know it and how it works. So what happens is these cells can rebuild themselves, and they become indistinguishable from young cells, not just in look, but also in function and productivity. So that's pretty important. So as we looked at this, we thought, okay, we won't make a claim that this creates NAD. We'll just say it supports the energy of the cell. But now, and I'll try and make it complex but less so as I can. One thing that happens is the whole ultimate goal of this is not to increase NAD. It is only one of the stepping stones in a cycle called the Krebs cycle, Krebs. And in the Krebs cycle, it develops energy. And what is the ultimate energy that needs to be produced? It's electrical energy. And our body runs off electrical energy. And so all the signals, all the functions, it's all electrical energy. And it all begins with the sun. The sun sends hydrogen energy down, solar energy. Plants convert it through photosynthesis into chemical energy. Now we eat plants, or animals eat plants, and then we eat the animals, and through that we get that chemical energy, which may change from one form to another until it goes into the cell. Now, it goes into the cell, and there are a number of things that have chemical energy. Glucose, of course, has it in it because it's the fuel source. But other things have components in it that are in the Krebs cycle that are working to increase the amount of electrical energy. So if you can take all the mitochondria that are there, suppose you could triple or quadruple the number of them. Studies are showing ingredients can do that. And you can repair them all. So they'll function at the optimum level rather than about 20% of what they were doing. And you can have 3 or 4 times more of it. And you can repair the entire stem cell with some of these ingredients, we believe. This is still our theory. Ours hasn't been tested. This is what the ingredients can do. So we've got all that. So what happens in that cycle? You take this ingredient, it goes to NAD, which goes to a whole bunch of other things that you don't need to know, but NMN, NADH, and a whole series. But then it goes to where it eventually kicks out into the mitochondria where it creates ATP. And some of you may have known that ATP is the energy molecule of the body, but it isn't. It's loaded with it. But the key to ATP is creating hydrogen. See, now here we are back to the sun. That chemical energy now gets converted back to the solar energy from whence it came from the sun. And now the final step is that now that solar energy in this stem cell now creates electrical energy. I've missed some steps in there, but it's not important for you to know it. So think of this. All life on Earth is dependent on the sun. That's hydrogen. It's converted by plants to chemical energy. Our bodies take that from plants and animals, and we convert it into various forms. It gets into our stem cells, which is the chicken, like the chicken that lays the egg, that starts slowing down with age, and it goes through and it rebuilds that whole stem cell to where it's indistinguishable from young again. It cleans up all the sludges and all the plaquing and tartar, that type of thing that's been building up within the cell, repairs all the entities, increases them by 3 or 4-fold, and then you go through the whole cycle of conversions of energy to where it finally comes back to converting hydrogen energy again, which turns into electrical energy, and with that, your body does everything. If you could touch your body with a wand that would take the electrical charge out of your body, it'd be just a pile of dust instantly like that. It holds everything together. It makes everything work. So the key is not producing more NAD. The key is producing electrical energy. And that's many steps beyond that. And there are many other compounds that are much more powerful than even the one that has got some of the publicity. And incidentally, we're the only one in MLM that's doing it. There's a couple others that are trying it, but they've tied it up in these patents so it's so rotten expensive they can't put what is really a powerful dose out. Well, we've gone around that with it, and we've done all these that create more, different compounds that create more of this energy, this NAD, this ATP, the biological hydrogen to the electrical energy, and all of that happens on a scale that's like, my God, it's like it's on steroids. It's like putting a jet rocket engine on a bicycle. You just suddenly have enormous power where it's going out and doing it. And that's what this is designed to do. You don't need to know all this. Big thing about it is you need to know stem cells are getting old. Within a few months, in all animal studies, on just some of the ingredients, and then sometimes in combinations of these, and each one of them it does, and we put them all together, they become indistinguishable from young cells and function straight. And actually, older animals could greatly outperform younger animals who are on the same feed and everything, except for these types of nutrients added to it. So that says a lot. Muscle growth, muscle size, bone strength, brain size, brain function, vision, hearing, skin, pigmentation. You can see now what's happening with it. People are getting dark hair all over us. Now their pigmentation's coming back. The places they have a problem with pigmentation on their skin, it's going away. Why? Because the natural mechanisms are doing it, but now they're being super fed, so that happens. With it comes strength, stamina, virility, libido, all of those things return with it. You require less sleep, you wake more refreshed, you have more strength, more stamina, everything. because the power of the sun is transformed through these in immense power to the stem cell, which is operating at 20-25%, say, of what it did when you're 20s, and suddenly all your biological indicators, in theory, could be back to where you were 20 again, and you can see it all over Facebook. Sure, they're anecdotal things that people are saying, but you think they're not telling the truth. There's too much to this. There's too many photos that are out there. Did you see Ricardo Loso with his? In 3 months, he looks 10 years younger. He just published those photos this past week. Stunning. I look, I don't know, 10, 20 years younger. I've been on it longer, but man, has it worked for me. And so I'm a living testimony, but people say, oh, that's just people. It can be a placebo. There's no placebo effect with this, but it's anecdotal. Clinical studies are billions of dollars and about 15 years to complete. We're not going to go through that, but we can show you the scientific studies and the proof of the. Now you heard the saying. You probably heard the proof is in the pudding. That is not the saying. You can put a lot of things in pudding and it can taste horrible. The saying is the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and that's what the age pill is. The proof of the age pill is in the formulation, and boy, does it work, and it works like nothing else that has ever been created on Earth. And I think this is by far the single greatest discovery in the history of human health, and by far, it is the single greatest product ever introduced in network marketing. Nobody else has it. They can't afford to make it. We have circumvented all that. We buy direct. We put it together, and we've got it so that now you can sell it at a price that almost everyone can afford to buy, and they can step back in time. Now age is only a number. That's not a saying anymore. Age is only a number. It is not an indication of how old you are. It is now an indicator of how many years you have lived. Your biological indicators will be going the other way, and as aging is simply decay and degeneration. If we can end the decay, and if we can increase more cells than you're losing, we are regenerating, and you do what? Grow younger. So that's the way it works.